Hello and welcome back to Ride Rescue. And this what will probably be the final video of the 64 Skylark Convertible. I'm going to finish the trunk, and that's really the last of all the fabrication for this car. After this video, I'll just take you through some of the shows and some of the awards. Don't need to brag, but I can't help but brag a little bit about this car and the awards that it won and some of the shows that I was able to take it to and the accolades. I was just really proud of how this car turned out and the response that I got from taking it to the different shows. So with everything else in the car just trying to get perfection and every nut and bolt to look perfect, now I need to do the same thing to the trunk. I've never finished the inside of a trunk before. I've seen a lot of them done. I've seen some done poorly. I've seen some done pretty elaborate. At the time, I was working for a shop that did cutting dies. Steel rule cutting dies for packaging, especially for corrugate. There's different machines where you've got a cookie cutter flat die as well as you've got some rotary dies. And there's the very smallest of the rotary dies. There's a cylinder on the rotary that's about they call it a 38-inch rotary. And the wood that they use for that is a fairly thin plywood, but it's very strong plywood. So I got looking at the contours of the trunk, and most people that I've seen finish off their trunks they're kind of boxy and hard edges, and that was what I was originally planning. But I'm looking at this plywood that I have access to at work, and I can round areas in the trunk that mimic the shape of the trunk, as well as round areas to the back of the trunk where the taillights are, and then do some step areas to the sides and to the back, and where I'm going to put in an amp and where I'm going to put in the speaker. And I'm going to cut a doorway and put in a hidden compartment. I have access to a laser at work, so I can put the plywood on this laser and do some angled cuts with some radiuses, and everything is just perfectly smooth where it cuts out, so I don't have to go back and sand. So the trunk is going to have a lot of plywood in it, but overall it's not really that heavy. My first thought was, oh, this is going to be real heavy and add a lot of weight to the trunk. But at the same time, the air suspension in this car is so active and jumps up so fast with the weight of the engine in the front and not having any weight in the tail. It has a tendency to kind of rock up, and it acts kind of funny the way the air suspension works while I'm driving down the road. So actually adding 45, 50 pounds, 60 pounds to the tail end of the car is a plus. And it's a convertible. It's a small block. I'm not going to be racing it. I'm not going to be drag racing it. So I'm not too concerned about adding weight to the trunk. But it balances things out. It does add traction. So I was really excited about how it all started to come together once I got it started. So to start, I wanted to do a compartment area in the bottom of the floor where I could fully enclose an area in plywood and carpet it so that I could remount the air compressor in that area and mount it to wood. I have it mounted to the tin of the floor of the car, and when that thing kicks on and runs, it vibrates the whole trunk, and it's like a drum. It has this thumping noise that is really irritating in the driver's compartment of the car, and especially if anybody's sitting in the back seat. It's really loud and obnoxious. And to have a stereo in the car and have that thing running, it takes away from the music. So I want to isolate that as well as enclose it to try to deaden some of that sound. So I built an area that is going to be fairly shallow with a door on it, and I can mount the pump sideways on the side of the plywood, and I can run the lines to that. And then in addition to running the lines to it, I can put a regulator there so I can regulate pressure to an air hose to air up a tire if I'm at a show and a tire's getting low, or if I get a screw in a tire and I want to just push in a plug. So I have a plug kit so I can get myself out of a jam. I also have a can of slime that I can put in if I still have a leak, even though I don't ever want to have to use that, but to get me out of a pinch in a jam if I'm out in the middle of nowhere, I'll be able to save myself because the car's not going to have a spare tire in it. So then on the sides, I want to be able to put in a hidden compartment on one side and a speaker subwoofer on the other side. Well, the subwoofers and the speakers that I've been shopping for, they have some great sound and they have some shapes, but they're boxy and I need to be able to work that in. So I started online by really studying how to build my own subwoofer box enclosure and put a baffle in it and have it kind of channel the sound to the back seat up over the fender well. So I built a compartment on the one side for the speaker, and then I built a compartment on the other side where I could close it in and put in my chemicals and cleaning supplies and things that I would take to a show and be able to, shine up the tires and polish the car and put some rags in there and a few other accessories. So to close off these compartments on the sides, I wanted to make them so that, especially where I'm going to be putting all my supplies, if I'm going through turns and turn a corner real sharp or hit a bump, I don't want the supplies banging in the fender well because I'll dent the paint, or we'll have little dents coming out on the rear fender. So I want to close that in, and I want to carpet it so that if things are banging around in there, it's silent, it's quiet, nothing's going to get broken, it's all cushioned. Well, to put a door on that compartment, and the shapes and the angles of that area, having access to the laser, I can customize the shape. So I want to angle the sides and angle the top and radius the corners. And with the laser, again, it's so smooth on the edges, I don't have to spend a lot of time cutting and sanding and smoothing those out. So the side panels, the back panel, and the area at the back seat, I want to do custom rounded corners with the rounded plywood I have. The back area where the tail lights are, I want to build around that. And then the area for the back seat, I want to angle some areas and give it some texture and some depth. And that's where I will mount the amplifier. And below that amplifier, rather than relocating my air tank, I'm going to leave some of that air tank exposed. So you'll actually see the polished stainless steel top section of that tank, and then the door will open and close next to that tank. And then I'll be able to, once the door is up, I'm putting in some air rams. The air ram, there's two of them. There's one that will kick up that bottom trunk floor, and the other one that will lift it. I tried to get the air ram to just lift the trunk door by itself, and it just wanted to bind up. It's such a shallow area, I couldn't get any arms or mechanisms that really made sense that would lift it up. Once I have that initial push, then the air ram works okay. So in the side compartment where I'm going to be putting all my chemicals, I added some switches in there, and I added some little air valves on just some 1/8" line, where with two of the switches, I'll be able to kick up with a little air ram that will do the initial kick and lift on that door panel, and then the other switch will kick it up the rest of the way. And the way the door opens on the side, it opens all the way up and it holds straight up and down, and then you run the switches and the door kicks up, and then that holds, the big door holds the little door, and everything is accessible by having those little air rams hold everything up. In theory, it worked great. And in a lot of the first initial workings as I was testing it and hooking up all the lines and checking the pressure and getting everything to work just right, it worked fine. But once I upholstered everything and I added that extra weight, I just couldn't get it to function anymore. So it ended up being just kind of a look and a conversation piece. Once I got everything aired up and all the pressure was there, I could lift it with the one, but it wouldn't go the rest of the way up. So I had a little fabric finger tug where I could lift it up the rest of the way and hit the switch. And it all worked in the end, but it didn't have the original function that I was hoping to have. But on the side piece, you can see all the wood panels, the bottom floor piece, I made it so that was all one piece, and there was a flexible plywood that went down around the bottom of it that was all tacked and stapled, and then I could cover it all with just a real thin, low loop gray carpet and give it a really nice finish as well as a sound deadener. And then the side pieces, I wanted them to be able to be removable and come out. I didn't want all of this permanent, but I wanted them to be nicely finished. So on the top of that back door, I wrapped that whole bottom door with a dark charcoal speaker fabric material. And then on the top of it, it was just so bland, so plain. Well, the original door panels in the car, there is 2 chevron stainless steel pieces, and they have little spikes that come out of the back of them that you push through the material of the door panel and then bend them over. Well, I drilled some 1/8-inch holes and made lines where these chevrons would fit, and I straightened out all those pins, and with the holes that I drilled into the plywood and through that gray fabric, I was able to tap those chevron points into the drilled holes and basically tack those 3 chevrons on. And those stainless steel chevron trim pieces just give it a really nice finish, and it made it look like it was kind of a grip or something that would hold pieces from sliding around and not tear up the carpet. So it turned out really good. I was pleased with that little afterthought of just having to have some things laying around that were leftover parts. Then on the side pieces, I wanted those to match the interior, so I spray mounted just a thin 1/8-inch thick foam to the side pieces, into the back piece and the amp area, and I spray mounted vinyl, black vinyl, on top of that foam and then wrapped all the edges. And then the doors and the area that was simulating the door, so the 2 sides matched, the speaker as well as the door, I did the same thing with those. I spray mounted some 1/8-inch foam onto those panels, and then I wrapped those with the suede. It was the same suede that we used for the inserts of the seat. So that tied everything all together. The side panels were removable. They could just slide into place and they screwed down. Well, the back panel was the same way. When I created the plywood piece, where the trunk lid closes, there's a rubber stops that hit on top of 2 metal brackets that came up. Those 2 metal brackets were the perfect height of what I wanted to finish the trunk, and where the center latch was for the trunk lid to close down against it but not scuff or scrape up that vinyl. So where the rubber stops were, the brackets that came up through, the metal brackets, I was able to hog out and cut holes in the plywood so that slid down over it, and it locked that back piece in. And then the bottom of it, where the door came down and closed against the bottom, I was able to put some little L brackets, some little chrome brackets, and run in a nice screw in the top of that. So when the door was open, you could see those 2 nice chrome brackets and the chrome screws, but then the door closed down on top of it and covered that up. So you didn't see any fasteners anywhere inside of that trunk. Everything was finished with nice vinyl or suede. The back panel and the trim where that meets up with the rubber seal, that was rolled and tucked and pushed right tight up against it. So that was all finished. And then where the Cadillac Latch went through, I took a piece of hard stock and just kind of cut out an area where that latch would come up through it. So that turned out really nice. So the way that back panel drops in, by just removing a couple of screws and lifting it out, then you have access to the taillights and the latch mechanism, so that if anything did go wrong, then you'd be able to replace any of those pieces. And down in the bottom then, where the air hose is, I also added a little air chuck. Because one of the things I found about the air compressor, when I first want to start up the car and take it to a show or just take it down the street, go get a soda, whatever, it takes 10-15 minutes to air the whole system up so that I can take the car for a drive. By just hooking up my air compressor, it just takes a few minutes, just a few seconds really, to air up the air compressor, and I can just run my air chuck onto that little line and air the whole system up really quick. So what typically takes 15 minutes, I can do in a couple of minutes, and the car is ready to go. So inside of the side compartment, I used the same carpet that I used for the bottom, that gray carpet you can see in the images. And then the back panel for the amplifier, I covered that in vinyl and suede. And then when that whole panel, it actually lays down on the floor, I can put down a blanket and lay that panel down on the amplifier so the amp doesn't scratch or get scratched from those chevrons that I added. And then on the back side of that, I added a bunch of speakers. I've got some mid-range speakers, some tweeters, I've got some crossovers that are built in, so I can get all kinds of great sound out of that back seat panel area. And then there's a capacitor that's on there so that it stores up that big boom, that oomph and push for the subwoofer, and without draining the battery or making the lights go dim. Because without that capacitor, when I did run the amplifier, it does dim the lights and pulls a lot of juice from the alternator. One of the things that I added, shh, don't tell anybody, the side panel that's hidden where you open it up and you put all the chemicals and the 3 switches. There's 2 switches, one to kick up the back area, as the other one to hold the area up, and the 3rd switch is actually to activate and deactivate a little popper under the back bumper. So one of the things I found when I get into the car and I open up the center console and I hit that button, the trunk would release and the mechanism would bring it all the way up. The pop mechanism and the pull down mechanism, the way it worked in the Cadillac, it had something that held that trunk lid up. When it popped, it had enough spring that would hold it up. Well, my trunk lid is just heavy enough and there's not enough spring to hold it up, that when that mechanism came up, it would relatch and it would pull the trunk back shut. So I'd get in the glove box, I'd push the button, I'd run around the back, and it would be pulling it back shut again. It was never quite fast enough. With the remote, I could hit it with the remote and it would pop open and I could open it up. But if I didn't have the remote with me, or I was at a car show and I want to pop the trunk, I finally just, out of frustration, decided, well, I'm going to add another switch that's hidden behind the license plate, and then I can activate that switch from inside the trunk. So if I go anywhere, if I go to the store, if I go get a soda, whatever, I can deactivate that switch. So if anybody at a car show did see me using that switch behind the license plate, I can deactivate that. But if I'm at a car show, I can turn that on and I can open and close the trunk and I can have access to that and then be able to turn it back off again. So then it secures and the alarm system then reactivates and everything is secure again. So that's it for the whole series of videos. In the next video, I want to take you through some of the shows, the events that I took the car to, the reactions that I got to the car, the awards that it won. It really has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the car. I've enjoyed taking it to the different shows, showing the car off, getting opportunities to discuss my work and things that I've done to it, and some of the other cars that I've done in the past. So I'll do the one last video. So when it comes to the actual build, this car is now finished. A few little finishing touches. I want to do some pinstriping to the wheels. I want to have that red line look. So I'll add that in the next video. So thanks again for watching my video. Please give me a thumbs up, like my video, share my videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Every little bit that you can do like that for me helps me build my channel and be able to keep doing more videos for you. So TTFN, ta-ta for now.